We gotta have this conversation before.
All right.
Okay, so we're gonna everyone's gonna see all the questions.
That's fine.
Yeah, everyone's live, okay?
So,
Do we let Nancy know how to?
No, he's gonna send me the link as soon as it goes live.
we're live.
Careful.
You ready? I'm Curtis Sliwa, and I want to thank all of you who happen to be watching out there because this is our first virtual town hall conference. And it's going to be interactive, so you're not going to have to worry about, oh, is Curtis just going to talk up all the time, take up all the talk time? No. I'll give an introductory remark about my campaign to become mayor of the city of New York, and then obviously we'll filter through some of your questions. We'll be doing this on a regular basis so that we can get more of you interactively involved in the campaign, especially now with the pandemic that still continues and so many people who cannot get together in public or don't feel comfortable getting together in public. This gives us a means to get our message out. So first you need to understand that if you notice, I'm suited down here, so I can easily fit into the suites, but I still have my red beret. That is an iconic figure for what I've done for 42 years in the streets as the founder and leader of the Guardian Angels, not just patrolling streets and parks and subways, making for better quality of life, safer streets, and teaching people how to care for themselves and not be so dependent on government and the police exclusively, but having exported the concept to 13 countries and 130 cities. So obviously when it comes to safe streets, that is really my sweet spot. I'm going to talk a little bit about that because clearly if you don't have safe streets, a safe subway system, safe parks, if you don't have safe schools for the children's return, especially as the vaccines kick in and there's more and more in-school training that'll take place, and all the other concepts and ideas about recovery and resurrection of this city after this damaging pandemic, and especially the way Cuomo and de Blasio have put their boots in the back of our heads and kept the municipality of New York from recovering at a slower rate than any other large city in America. So it starts with law and order. Number one, we saw in the aftermath of Mr. Floyd's killing in the streets of South Minneapolis, unprecedented. First, they were the normal kinds of demonstrations. But I noticed that the demonstrations did not come with a permit process. And all previous demonstrations that I've ever been involved in my lifetime, in fact, I'll be 67 years old tomorrow, and nobody thought that I'd be able to survive the many ordeals I've been through. But I can remember many, many protests in the anti-war years, especially when Richard Nixon and LBJ were president, in which people would pull out 1 million strong. You had a permitting process, and everybody understood you could get a permit. And if the police department didn't provide a permit, you had people from the American Civil Liberties Union who would go to court and get you a permit. But I noticed what happened. The moment that the worst mayor in the city of New York in our lifetime ever came into the position of making these decisions, he eliminated the permitting process. So now on any given day, no matter who it is that a particular group is, there's no permitting process. They march in the streets, they block traffic, they violate people's rights. And no matter what the concept is that they're demonstrating for, oftentimes it turns into violent actions against the police, who obviously have to follow them and make sure they're safe and secure and that others in their path are safe and secure. And there are some candidates out there who don't even want police to escort demonstrations any longer in the city. That's crazy, especially when you've been in my position with the Guardian Angels, where back in June, we were actually physically engaging rioters and looters because this Mayor de Blasio ordered the police to stand down. I got my jaw broken on June 2nd. Other Guardian Angels were seriously injured in Midtown and down in Soho when we were protecting property and also product. And many were saying, why would you put your lives at risk for property and product? They have insurance. Because history tells us if you allow for that kind of anarchy to take place, then they come for the people. And they certainly have been doing that on a regular basis ever since. Major mistakes were made along the way. And the number one mistake was to neuter and render our police department impotent. Now, because of defunding, taking $1 billion out of their budget, they are reactive instead of proactive. They don't know what they're supposed to do. They don't know if they're supposed to chase a suspect, how to detain a suspect. We want them always to be at fault when government itself has failed by allowing emotionally disturbed persons to live in the subways and in the parks and roam the streets. They're a danger to themselves. They're a danger to everyone else. So who do we blame? We blame the police because oftentimes they are the ones who have to respond when there's a 911 call or a 311 call. The many homeless who are out and about, who's responsible for people becoming homeless? We could have a long discussion as to how that transpires, but oftentimes it is the police who have to interact with them because there's a 911 call or a 311 call. And meantime, the elected officials who are responsible for the care and the maintenance of the mentally ill and the homeless, they have abrogated their responsibility. And so they blame the police. Well, as mayor of the city of New York, there'll be no more blaming of the police. We are going to restore the budget. That's right. Refund the $1 billion. We're going to boost the morale of each police officer, man and woman, in every precinct of the city, because I'm going to personally visit them. I'm going to shake their hands when they're shaping up for their assignments, for their 8-hour shifts. I'm going to be there to cheer them on. I'm going to say, I've got your back. But because I've been on the other side of the criminal justice system when police did not like the Guardian Angels in the first 13 years of our existence, from 1979 to 1992, I'm going to tell each and every police officer personally, if you cross that Maginot line, if you violate citizen rights, I'll be your worst nightmare. There won't be a blue wall of silence. That's a fair, square deal for men and women who put their lives on the line each and every day for us. We're going to return a quality of life to the city so that people can go about working or visiting or taking care of their families or enjoying the beauty of New York City safely and securely. Because now there's tolerance for everything. A person can violate your rights. They can defecate. They can urinate. They can be shooting up drugs. They can be smoking K2. They can be beaming themselves up to Scotty by taking rocks of crack cocaine, putting into a glass pipe, and basically just self-indulging at everybody else's expense. That's going to stop. Those are quality of life violations. It doesn't mean you're going to put people in prison for that. But you certainly can't allow that to continue because the quality of life gets diminished. And many of our fellow New Yorkers have fled as a result, those who can. Those who can't, they've hunkered down. They're not going to enjoy all of New York City as it opens up, because that's the other thing I'm going to do as the mayor of the city of New York. We are going to open up New York City, the bars, the restaurants, Broadway, off-Broadway, the entertainment complexes, the cultural facilities that have made us the crown jewel of the entire world, of America. And now look at it. Oftentimes it's 12 midnight. You go to Times Square, you might as well be in downtown Buffalo. Who's responsible for that? Cuomo and de Blasio. That's why de Blasio has to go. And I see there are a number of Democrats who'd like to take his place. But quite frankly, they may even be worse than de Blasio. I am going to open up this city. When it comes to property taxes, you go to the outer boroughs. And you look in the outer boroughs and you say, why did this fail? Why if someone in Eltingville in Staten Island, or in Morris Park in the Bronx, or out there in Middle Village in Queens or Maxwell, or where I was born and raised in Canarsie, why is it they pay more property tax on a one-family or two-family dwelling than, let's say, a family or an owner operator of a brownstone in Park Slope or Carroll Gardens. Why is there this disparity? No, it's got to be an even field in terms of everybody paying fairly their property tax, but not a brownstone that's worth millions paying less property tax than a one or two, either attached or unattached house in a blue collar, lower blue collar, or even poor indigent community. That's not going to happen. When it comes to our educational system, let's look at the budget. We have $92 billion that have been allocated into the New York City budget. Much of it is bloated, much of it is waste. But the biggest spender of the money is the Department of Education, $30 billion. And let's look at what Carranza, the outgoing superintendent, and his replacement with the aid, the tactical air support of Mayor de Blasio wanted to do. They wanted to destroy two of the best programs that exist in the public school system. First off, they don't want there to be a test any longer for students to be able to get into the elite public high schools, whether it's Stuyvesant, Bronx High School of Science, Brooklyn Tech, Staten Island Tech, or Townsend on the Queens College campus. They want that eliminated. And so all of a sudden, we're saying to the growing Asian population and Southeast Asian population that's doing well academically, whose parents get their children tutoring after school so that they can compete. Oh, well, you played by all the rules. You did exactly what we told you to do to achieve academic excellence. But you know something? We're going to put a cap on Asian students, Southeast Asian students, and most importantly, if you take a test and you do extraordinarily well, we're not going to give you entrance into the best public high schools in the country. How unfair is that? And then you want to get rid of the gifted and talented program? I have three sons in the public school system. Anthony, who's in the public high school, Carter, who's in the junior high school, and Hunter, who's in an elementary school. I remember sitting in an auditorium in Queens, waiting for Carter to go through the different questions in which administrators and teachers asked to see if the child is qualified for gifted and talented. He wasn't. Neither was my youngest son, Hunter. They go to good public schools in Queens. They're getting a good education, but you don't eliminate gifted and talented. And the whole penchant of the Department of Education seems to be to want to desegregate the schools. Well, I can tell you, having been a child of the 60s, part of which I went to public schools, that forced busing does not work. It didn't work for the children who were coming from nearby Brownsville, predominantly Black at that time, East New York, predominantly Hispanic, or Canarsie, which was predominantly Italian and Jewish at the time. Busing children across neighborhood lines did not improve the education for anyone. Improving neighborhood schools is the way to do that. Empowering the teachers and making sure that they have a safe and secure academic environment. And I see that some of the candidates for mayor want to eliminate the New York City Police Department supervising school security. Some have said they want to take out the metal detector machines. Others have said they don't want security officers wearing a New York City Police Department uniform. In fact, they want it to go back to the way it was when it was dysfunctional under the old Board of Education. That's crazy. That would be like taking metal detectors out of the airports or out of the venues when you go to see the Mets at Citi Field or Yankee Stadium or to Madison Square Garden or to Barclays. You go through a metal detector. Nobody's thinking that everybody coming is intent on doing harm to anyone, but in order to make sure that everyone is safe and secure. Charter schools, we're not only going to support more charter schools, we're going to give them the space in which the demand that they have for space is overwhelming the supply of space that they have. They have a lottery system in which only 1 out of every 8 students is able to get into a charter school. Now, you could make the argument before, as de Blasio has, who has said he hates charter schools, that there wasn't enough space. But because of the pandemic, one thing you see everywhere you go is a lot of empty commercial space, empty buildings, empty residential space. You can repurpose that space so that charter schools will have more space to be able to educate more children. And that's part of the choice that has to be offered to parents and to those who are their guardians. And then for parochial schools, whether they happen to be Catholic or Jewish or Protestant or whatever, you want to give them an opportunity at vouchers and tuition tax credits to the parents because, boy, are they proven that they could actually exist in a pandemic and teach the children with the teachers in a school process. And most importantly, vocational training. This is going to be the linchpin to my educational program. I saw many of my cousins who grew up with me in Canarsie and East New York, had it not been for vocational training, they might well have ended up in prison, or they might well have ended up destitute and without means of self-support. But because of the vocational high schools at the time in the 60s, they learned a negotiable skill. They became carpenters, electricians, plumbers. You realize now that Google, 1/3 of those who program the computers actually only have a high school education. Now, where did they learn the programming skill? It wasn't in the public school system, no, or the parochial school system, or the charter school system, because I want all three of them to offer vocational training at all different levels. They had to go to a professional training school like Apex or other schools of that type, where they have to get a Pell Grant, which we fund, the taxpayers. And when we had a captive audience of them in high school, whether it was charter school, public school, or parochial school, we didn't introduce them to vocational training. Rather, we waited for a professional school to do it at great taxpayer expense. How specious is that? How foolish is that? That's going to be at a hallmark. So that's just some of the issues that are going to be part of the agenda of what I hope to implement when I become mayor of the city of New York. Now, remember, I have to get through a Republican primary on June 22nd. I also have to raise the money to run because I'm the last candidate who announced just 10 days ago right outside of Penn Station. So you can go online to CurtisSliwa4Mayor.com, CurtisSliwa4Mayor.com, and you can actually see how you can help this campaign. Remember, we're the last to jump into the race, and we've got to make up for lost time. So if you can donate the money. In New York City, there's an 8-to-1 match if you happen to be a resident. Believe it or not, if you can donate $10 at CurtisSliwa4Mayor.com, $10 becomes $90, which will help us catch up El Rapido. So those are the different ways you can get involved to volunteer. You can find out the events that we're going to be actually engaging in and participating in as this campaign moves on to the primary. And when I become the candidate of the Republican primary, then it's on to the general election. You know, a lot of people have said a Republican cannot get elected mayor in the city of New York. And I think because of my background, having been in Black, white, Hispanic, Asian, gay, lesbian, hipster, millennial neighborhoods for 42 years, making a difference, that I transcend the normal boundaries that have limited Republicans in the past. So I'm asking for your help, but right now, I'm asking for your many questions in terms of what the mayoral of Curtis Sliwa, what a Mayor Curtis Sliwa might be able to do with the many, many subjects that I just didn't have an opportunity to touch on. I see there was one question about the fentanyl crisis. What to do about fentanyl? Well, I'm an expert on fentanyl because for a year I was on fentanyl. I had ileitis, colitis, and chronic Crohn's disease. I was taking all kinds of painkillers as I went for 3.5 years from 220 pounds down to 120 pounds. Oxys, Vicodin, morphine, and fentanyl. And having been on morphine before when I was shot 5 times with hollow point bullets on the orders of John Gotti Sr., the John Gotti Jr., and the Gambino crime family on June 19th of 1992, I know what serious painkillers can do. They're needed sometimes for medical purposes, but they're oftentimes abused. So when you have a company like Purdue, family owned, that was churning out oxys on a regular basis and profiting from people's despair, when you see mainland China producing this incredible amount of fentanyl that is being smuggled into our country in the belly of ships, that is coming right into the Straits of Verrazano, through the Arthur Kill, the Kill Van Cove, and into the port of Newark and Elizabeth and other ports of call. You say, wow, we really have to strengthen our enforcement and our detection efforts because it comes across our border. And obviously, it has caused many people to suffer an early death, many people to suffer addiction. that has a real emasculating effect on themselves, their families, and their opportunity to live the American dream. We have Joe Mitch, who asks, what's your position on bail reform? Letting criminals out without any jail time. Well, I know that many candidates, they posture, they run for office, and immediately they comment on all kinds of things that they have no impact on whatsoever as mayor. You have to understand, I am opposed to the bail reform that was implemented by Governor Cuomo and the state legislature. They were all in partnership on that. Although at times they seem to run away from it. They claim to have made minor changes to the no bail rule. But I will tell you this, New Jersey has a much better no bail rule. You don't hear any of the kind of problems that we've had here with the recidivists, the violent felons being released back into the streets with nothing more than like a ticket. They get what we call a desk appearance ticket by the local police precinct with a date for return to court 6 months from now. We call it in the streets a disappearance ticket because it releases you to go back and commit the crime again and again. Bail is always meant to guarantee your return to court, but it also should be issued by a judge. There needs to be judicial discretion. If you, the suspect, are a danger to yourself or a danger to other persons in society, there should be a bail requirement. Now, New Jersey allows for that kind of judicial discretion. So why didn't we just adopt the measures in New Jersey? Because King Cuomo and the other legislators, pretentious, always omnipotent, thinking New Yorkers know better than anyone else, instead of copying the successful New Jersey no bail law, decided to create their own with no input from law enforcement, no input from prosecutors, no input from the criminal justice system. It's been a complete disaster. I can't change it at the city level, but every time someone is released into the streets of the city because of no bail, I can be there and the cameras and the reporters will follow. And because of my street cred, I'll be able to connect the dots for all the citizens and continue to pressure, whether it's Cuomo or he resigns or he's impeached, I hope, or his replacement, Lieutenant Governor Hochul, or any of the other state legislative Democratic leaders. Continue to put pressure on them, if nothing more, to adopt a New Jersey style no bail law, which has relatively been effective. It's not perfect, but it's a lot better than what we have in New York. Let's go to Peter Choke, who can New York City become more resident and tourist friendly? I cannot even carry a pocket knife without feeling like a criminal. Well, guess what? It used to be, right? 4 fingers you put on a blade. Trust me, I've been stabbed with enough blades. No, 4 fingers or more, and immediately you would be remanded to jail, no bail. That obviously doesn't exist any longer with this no bail law. You could be walking around with a Rambo knife, just sharpening it. Samurai swords. There have been thugs out there, emotionally disturbed persons who have been wielding samurai swords as if this was the 3rd edition of Kill Bill. And little, if anything, has occurred to them when they've been caught. And they've been detained by the police department and they're being given what I call a disappearance ticket. So even pepper spray, things of that nature at times can cause a potential victim, if they fight back, if they protect themselves, to be in more trouble than the criminal themselves. Under the administration of Curtis Sliwa, I will be promoting victims fighting back. I will be promoting the fact that if you've been a victim of a violent crime, if you are a store owner or a vendor or someone who has been the victim of a crime committed against you, we've got to make it a lot easier to get a permit to carry a gun in order to protect your property, to protect yourself. Now, we don't want Texas rules or Florida rules in New York City. I'm not a believer in that approach. But I got to tell you, I was offered a carry permit when I was shot by the Gattis and Gambinos in 1992. I rejected that by the NYPD because leading the Guardian Angels, we carry no weapons. But could you have imagined somebody else shot 5 times like Curtis Sliwa, who happened to be lucky enough to survive, and knew that they were going to continue to try to kill you? Why would we want to deny somebody who can legally and lawfully prove that they should be able to carry a legal weapon to defend themselves and their property and knows how to use it. That should be the other standard. They have to take a test and show that they know how to use the weapon safely, secure it, the whole 9 yards. That should be an option for victims. I don't want to see more New York City residents or visitors or tourists be victims of crime, because right now the crime rate is skyrocketing. Let's go to Andrew Jason Pollock. What is your take on the homeless hotels? First off, I don't think people realize that right now, because of the pandemic and the executive orders that were signed by Andrew Cuomo and Mayor de Blasio. Remember, everyone was fearful that then President Donald Trump would be writing all these executive orders and acting as a dictator. He chose not to do that. Our governors and mayors, especially Cuomo and de Blasio, everyday executive orders. So they closed most of the shelters, and they took mostly single able-bodied men, some women, and put them into these empty hotels. You look at Hell's Kitchen, Chelsea. You look at Manhattan, the Times Square area. There are about 18,000 people who have been housed who previously were homeless that were in shelters, the normal shelters, and then they have what they call the micro shelters. Those are for the mentally disturbed, those who are in need of mental health care. And I will tell you this, that eventually these men and women are going to have to leave those hotels if we're going to encourage tourists to come back, because where are they going to stay? There's only so many Airbnbs, right? They got to have some place to stay. But there's going to be resistance to that. I'll give you one short story, because we've been patrolling the Upper West Side since the past summer when there were so many problems, when homeless people were put into 4 nearby hotels overnight, no transparency. Community boards didn't know, citizens didn't know. The totalitarian long arm of de Blasio just pushed these homeless people in warehouse them with no services for their alcohol problems, their drug addiction problems, their other problems. As you can hear behind me, the city, Fear City, 24/7, 365 now, as the police are running from 911 call to 911 call. But anyway, as I continue, so the men in the Lucerne, single able-bodied men, were represented by legal aid. And so the city said, I'll tell you what, we'll extricate you from the Lucerne, which is on 72nd Street, right off of Amsterdam. And we'll send you to the Marriott down on Wall Street. Now in the Lucerne, each man has to share a room with another man. You got a bunk, it's like 2 bunks. At the Marriott, you would have your own room. When I talked to the homeless men, they said, can't wait to go to the Marriott. First of all, it's a more modern hotel. I'll get my own room. I'd much rather go there. Legal aid told them, no, you'll be emotionally traumatized. You won't be able to function. You need to stay at the Lucerne. Nonsense. Speeches. A lot of this is going to be common sense, but we have to provide services for the homeless, or all we're going to be doing is warehousing them at great expense. And look at this crook that de Blasio put in charge of so many of the homeless service programs, the nonprofits, who is not only taking money hand over fist with no checks and balances and hiring his own family and his cronies and his sycophants and lackeys, but was sexually abusing a lot of the women who were tenants in these homeless shelters, right? De Blasio, again, windows on his eyes, no accountability. That accountability and transparency will exist when I'm mayor of the city of New York, because I've been in so many of the shelters, whether they are the old armories, like up in Washington Heights, like on Atlantic Avenue, whether they're out on Randall's Island, or they're the smaller shelters that have been pushed into various neighborhoods of Lake Pride de Blasio with no transparency, no discussion with the community, and in fact, little if any discussion with the elected officials until the moment when the men and the women are being moved into the shelters. Let me go to give you some information as we move along el rapido. And I'll be more than happy to engage any other questions or statements that any of you have out there who are listening and watching this first virtual town hall meeting of Curtis Sliwa, because I am running for mayor. I've got to win a Republican primary first on June 22nd, and then get into the general election against anyone who survives the democratic process, which should prove to be quite a bloodbath. To learn more about my campaign, go to CurtisSliwa4Mayor.com. That's CurtisSliwa4Mayor.com. And the thing I need most, because I was the last candidate to announce, some of these candidates have been running for a year or more. Some of these candidates, because they've applied to what they call the CFP, have been able to get matching funds. They're so far ahead of me when it comes to their ability to have raised money. That we're way behind. So I need financial contributions. If you happen to be a resident of New York City, of the 5 boroughs, if you just gave $10, and you can go on to curtissliwaformayor.com and it'll direct you to the site, your $10 becomes $90. Up to $250 of a donation from a city resident is matchable by 8 times. You could give as much as $2,000 if you live in the city. That's not matchable. And if you're outside of the city, hey, we need your money too, although it's not matchable. We need so much money in order to be able to compete. Please go to curtissliwaformayor.com. Don't wait. An hour later, something's going to happen. You'll fall asleep. You'll wake up tomorrow. Some minor emergency is occurring, and you'll forget all about it. Go online right now. Go onto your cell phone, your iPhone, your smartphone. Go onto your laptop computer. Go onto your home computer and hit that site, curtissliwaformayor.com. And please make a contribution or volunteer your effort or agree to hold a fundraiser, or we'll keep you informed of the many events that are going to be occurring both in the Republican primary, and I'm sure I'm going to be in the general election, and that too, so that I can become the mayor in November and save our city. Michael Skoll asks, how will you expand your base beyond those already committed to voting for you? Excellent question. Many of you need to be aware that the largest Republican county of Republicans is Staten Island. They not only have so many Republicans there, but they've elected Republicans. They've been in fierce battles with Democrats. You saw recently how Assemblywoman Nicole Malliotakis beat Max Rose, the sitting congressman, who had raised $20 million. Nicole only raised $10 million and was able to beat him because she's very capable, very adept, and has run for mayor before. In fact, she ran against Comrade Bill de Blasio, the dope from Park Slope. Unfortunately, she lost, but she battled tough, as are so many of the other Republican elected officials who've gone through bruising primaries and sometimes bruising battles against Democrats. They know how to raise money. They know how to put boots on the ground. So I'm proud that they were the first to support me. Soon after, across the Verrazano Bridge, the large Brooklyn GOP contingent endorsed me. They took a vote, 35-11, to endorse me. As a result of those 2 major endorsements, just the other day at Board of Election headquarters, downtown Broadway, we turned in 10,000 signatures on the petitions that their volunteers gathered in the streets with my help, because I was everywhere. Bing, 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 bing. Ricochet Rabbit outside his shop, right? I was in the Staten Island Ferry. I was everywhere where petitions were being gathered. Do you realize that Andrew Yang, the Yang Gang, that's right, because the media has created him as, it's a form of idolatry, only turned in 9,750 signatures for his campaign. Now, obviously, he'll qualify to get into the Democratic primary, but there's an 8-to-1 ratio of Democrats to Republicans. We were able to get 10,000 signatures. That hasn't been done before in a major Republican primary. So we're proud of Staten Island. We're proud of Brooklyn. We're proud of support that we have in Queens and the Bronx and Manhattan. And my goal for all of you to understand is to take the Republican Party where they haven't gone before. There are neighborhoods that I've been in for 42 years where the only Republican that anybody knows is Abraham Lincoln on a $5 bill. And Republicans have not been in the projects. They've not been in the tenements. They've not been in a lot of what you would call all blue neighborhoods where there are a lot of Democrats. They just have written it off. That's where I'll be because I've been there before as a guardian angel, and I'll be there again as a Republican candidate to become the next mayor of the city of New York. Phyllis Isola asked, what happened with the killer dogs of Tuxedo, the cat in Canarsie? Oh, Phyllis, thank you for reminding me of that. What a shanda, what a disgrazia. So the Brookline Housing Project, near where I grew up in Canarsie, is right off 108th and Flatlands Avenue. It's the separation between Canarsie, Brownsville, and East New York. It's low-rise public housing. And there is a woman there, a saint, who actually takes care of the feral cats. She has feral cat colonies. And my wife, Nancy, runs the Guardian Angel Animal Protection Division, along with other animal lovers all throughout the city who take care of feral cats because in their colonies, Remember, they're not going to be able to come in. You can't take a feral cat from the outside and make it a domestic cat on the inside of your house. No, no, no. They live outdoors, and they are the best deterrent to rats, rodents, and mice. Think of all the poisons that we pay for that have only made the rats and the mice and the rodents almost immune to those poisons, like super rats. Whereas just one cat in an area will keep the rats, the mice, and the rodents at bay. That's why these cat colonies are so important. Tuxedo, this cat, was considered the mayor of the Brookline housing projects. Everybody loved Tuxedo. And then two young people, a young man and a young woman, had pits. And clearly they had trained these pits because they're not born this way. I mean, I don't know many of you if you've known pits and other Rottweilers and other dogs that oftentimes have been mischaracterized as fighting dogs. No, no, no. They were trained to attack. And this young man and this young woman sicked their dogs on Tuxedo, who was up in a tree. And they were able to extricate Tuxedo from the tree, and they ripped Tuxedo limb from limb. And there were people who saw what happened, and they had window shades on their eyes, a zipper on their mouth, cotton balls in their ears, because they subscribed to the code of the streets, which is snitches get stitches and end up in ditches. At first, the police department did not take action. The guardian angels were out there. We had the flyers with the suspects. And then it became an international issue. People from around the world demanded that justice be done in the slaughter, the death of Tuxedo. And finally, an arrest was made, but unfortunately, because the criminal justice system is so weak, this person was not remanded to jail, no bail. They were arrested, they were released, they have a court date. I don't even know if their dog was taken from them. Now, again, I am an advocate of no-kill shelters. I don't want any dog, any cat, any animal any longer killed in the shelter system of New York City. I don't know if many of you are aware, there is a clock ticking. Every time a dog or cat or other animal is turned in to the shelter system of New York City that we pay millions of dollars for, they have 72 hours before they're executed. Even a call from the governor cannot stay their execution. They are euthanized right next door to where they're kept in cages. How inhumane. When I'm mayor of the city of New York, first thing I'm going to do is to say no more kill shelters. There are so many men and women who want these animals, who want to care for them. We'll give them a stipend. We'll help them to pay for their food, for the vets. There's so much unused land in central New York and western New York. And a lot of older folks who have these vast properties would be more than happy to take these animals so that they can live out their lives, playing, enjoying life, not being left to be slaughtered at taxpayers' expense. That's a no-no. In honor of Tuxedo and all those other animals who have died a tragic death with no consequences for the perpetrators, you better believe it. I have been into prisons. I have seen men. There are three reasons that many of them end up on death row. They can't read, they can't write, they come from a dysfunctional background, and they started by abusing animals, which then led to abuse of their own family members, strangers, and others, and probably was the lead into them being on death row. Any other questions that we have here? Oh, in fact, let me ask a question. Many people would say, okay, Curtis, we know that you know more about the streets and the neighborhoods of New York City and the subways than any other candidate running. In fact, I actually have a card I give out now. Any of you who've known me over the years, I'm always giving out cards. You have all my different business cards from my 30 years in talk radio at WABC. But now I have the mayoral cards for each circumstance. I have the card I give out in the subways. I'm the only mayoral candidate who rides the subways each and every day. And that's what I'll continue to do as mayor. The other thing, notice the sanctimonious hypocrites, like the mayor, de Blasio, like the public advocate, Jumaane Williams, like Scott Stringer. They want to defund the police. And yet, are you aware, at your taxpayers' expense, they have 24-hour armed security of the NYPD. What are they afraid of? Why do they need armed security? I don't want any police officers guarding me. If I can't walk the streets of the 5 boroughs of the city of New York safely and securely, I should either go get a job hanging wallpaper or retire to the 6th borough of the city of New York, which is either Boca Raton or the Poconos. No. And I don't need an SUV, taxpayer paid for vehicle driven by a police officer. Yeah, from time to time, in order to get to places in the city, you need a vehicle. But why not just Uber, Lyft, or yellow cab like everybody else? When you can't get there by mass transit. I'll be the mayor that actually uses the subways and uses the buses. And that's Jumani Williams, the public advocate, right? The one who hates the cops the most. He wants to defund the police, defund prisons. Are you aware where Jumani Williams, the people's public advocate, lives? He lives at Fort Hamilton, the military base, on the base, in the garrison, where you have to show ID to the MPs, the military police, every time you go in there. What is he afraid of? 24-hour armed security by the NYPD? No, that will stop in a Curtis Sliwa administration. It will be do as I say and as I do. Unlike Jumani Williams, de Blasio, and Scott Stringer Woods. Do as I say, hey, but don't pay attention to what I do. Let's get that other question here. Andrew, Jason Pollock asked, will the NYPD receive funding? They will be refunded in a Sliwa administration. We will restore the $1 billion. We will refund the money. They are not going to have that stripped from their budget. Also, the street crime unit, which has been so good, the undercover men and women are getting guns off the streets and interacting with the gangs to stop them from their continued drive-by shootings, and also as they engage in retribution and revenge, as they have massive shootouts back and forth. Street crime unit will be back in effect. The homeless outreach unit of the NYPD, which was so good at helping these men and women, many of them destitute, which was eliminated when they took $1 billion out of the budget, will be restored, because these are men and women who were given special training as police officers. There is an attempt to say we don't want the police responding to emotionally disturbed person calls, of which there are many now. Any of you have scanners, you hear the 911 calls. EDP in the store, EDP on the corner, EDP threatening to throw somebody in the tracks of an oncoming train, 110th Street, and the 2 and 3 train. And they're saying, well, mental health professionals should respond. Okay, there should be a compromise here. Why not have a group of mental health experts assigned to each and every precinct? You know, the firefighters have the EMTs assigned to each firehouse. They don't go in the fire trucks, they go in the ambulance. You have the mental health experts accompany the police, because I've dealt with so many emotionally disturbed persons. Sure, you have the mental health experts take the lead, but if things get out of control, at least you have the police who are right there to deal with a circumstance that could easily get out of control. But we are going to refund the police. We are not defunding the police. Let's go to Josh Manning. He says, all over the city, rezoning has destroyed our neighborhoods and our cultural heritage. Will you support historic preservation and low-rise zoning? Well, first off, let's be honest. Before there's any more high-rises that are going to be built, we have to determine how to properly utilize the space that is all vacant as we speak. When the lockdown came about, there were many buildings that had to be completed, the construction that is even underway now because the money was already allocated, whether it was a capital improvement program of government or if it was the private sector. We're going to have to repurpose space because so much of the commercial space will not be used. So much of the residential space has been abandoned. And in fact, the old concept of supply and demand will answer a lot of that because there's so much supply, very little demand. Prices and leasing and rentals should reflect that, should be dropping like a rock, and some are. But I know that zoning is important. I know that there are circumstances that involve housing and other issues of great importance, and obviously capital improvement developments. You still want to go through the same process, but no city council person out of the 51 in city council should be able to stand and publicly say, I am against a program of building improvement that will not only improve the job prospects for people in my community, like we saw recently in Sunset Park, right along the abandoned waterfront, And it's destitute. It's abandoned. There are rats. There needs to be development there. It would have been a job creator. And the council person there said, no, I'm opposed to it. And other council people, they have this belief that if their fellow council person is opposed through zoning, through the capital improvement situations that are coming from the private sector in partnership with the governmental sector, that should be dead on arrival. That's got to stop. The mayor has got to intervene, has got to do what is in the best interest of all the citizens of the city. And job creation is going to be number one, because there are so many men and women who are without work. And if they continue to be unemployed, they are going to follow the path of flight that 300,000 New Yorkers have already undertaken to Florida and Georgia and South Carolina, North Carolina, and Texas and Tennessee for a variety of reasons. I wish those people no harm, like de Blasio has done. I want to encourage them to come back. If they're not going to come back permanently, maybe they'll have a second apartment here. I want them to continue to visit their family and friends. And when I open up the city, and it will be opened up, Times Square, the Great White Way, Broadway, off-Broadway, all the theaters, the bars, the restaurants, the cultural and entertainment institutions, I want them to know that New York City will return to the greatness and grandeur that it had years before. In fact, when you look at Penn Station and you say, why did they demolish that crown jewel, Penn Station? In fact, it's been in many of those black and white movies you've seen over the years. They took a wrecking ball to it. Look at what they replaced Penn Station with. They plopped Madison Square Garden on top of it, now owned by Dolan, who pays no property taxes. Are you crazy? Dolan pays no property taxes because he's wine-dined and pocket-lined officials going way back to Ed Koch. That's going to stop. And obviously, we're not going to take any of these landmark buildings and destroy them, because that's part of the culture, the ambiance of New York City. That's what makes New York City what it is. I always think how they took the wrecking ball to the old Penn Station and what they replaced it with. That's not going to happen in a Curtis Sliwa administration, although that's going to be in partnership with community boards, with business interests, with residential interests. I'm not going to be a dictator. Again, I'm not pretentious. I don't have all the answers. I'm going to expect collective participation before we make a decision that's in the best interest of all New Yorkers and the residents of that particular community. Again, if you're interested in helping my campaign effort, please go to CurtisSliwaForMayor.com. That's CurtisSliwaForMayor.com. More importantly, spread the word. Let others know, not just those that live in the 5 boroughs, but our friends in the surrounding tri-state area who under normal circumstances before the lockdown would be pouring into New York every day for work or play or entertainment, or would be spending their money in purchasing from retail and wholesale and coming in on the weekends and enjoying the beauty of New York City. We want to encourage them to come back to New York City. And yes, we want to encourage everyone in America to support this campaign, because this is a campaign for law and order. This is a campaign that is going to refund the police. Other cities have that same problem. And we have a lot of ex-New Yorkers out there who have settled all the way out from Portland, Oregon, to San Diego, California, to San Antonio, Texas, to Miami Beach, and every part in between. And we want them, because we consider them New Yorkers. Even though they're no longer here, they have the heart of a New Yorker. We want them to participate in our campaign to take back New York from the criminals, so that the streets are safe, the subways are safe, the parks are safe, the schools are safe, and we can get the city of New York back on track. So please go to CurtisSliwaForMayor.com. Make the contribution. I desperately need it because we're so far behind. I was the last candidate to announce my candidacy. And make whatever contribution you can. If you live in the 5 boroughs of New York City, there's an 8-to-1 match for $10. Hey, believe it or not, I get $90 for the campaign. Please look into that. And if you're from outside of the city of New York, you can make a contribution too. We're willing to accept money from everywhere. As long as you're a legal citizen living within the United States, we can accept your contribution, because we need that money too. And understand, there will be an open door effect at City Hall. The one door that will be closed is to the lobbyists. Those men and women many of whom have been in elective office before, and they come into City Hall and they wine, dine, and pocket line the mayor. In this case, Bill de Blasio, who you know was on the ropes. Preet Bharara almost indicted Bill de Blasio. His only excuse for not being indicted? Hey, my lawyers told me that's the way I should operate a nonprofit. He was corrupt before, he's corrupt as mayor, he'll probably be corrupt in the future. There's $1 billion that he has secured from the taxpayers for a Thrive program run by his wife that was meant to care for the mentally ill, for those who are mentally unstable. Have any of you seen Thrive workers, Thrive volunteers, Thrive paid consultants, or experts out there in the streets dealing with the destitute, those who are mentally handicapped? The answer is absolutely jack diddly squat not. In fact, when I become mayor, I'm going to look back at that program. I'm going to ask, hey, Scott Stringer, when you were controller and now you want to be mayor, how come you didn't use subpoena power to look at the books? Hey, Corey Johnson, when you were speaker of the city council, now you want to be controller, how come you didn't use subpoena power? Hey, Tish James, Attorney General of the state of New York, why didn't you use your subpoena power to look at the books and to ask, where did that $1 billion of desperately needed tax dollars go? Well, this mayor, Curtis Sliwa, is going to take that $1 billion that was abused and misused and maybe criminally transported to other locations, because it certainly hasn't helped the mentally ill, of which there are many in the streets and parks and subways of New York. That has to be fully vetted out, fully investigated, and that $1 billion is going to be restored right to the NYPD. $1 billion taken out of their budget. First and foremost, we're going to refund it to the police. So we're going to continue to have these town hall forums. It's great because we can virtually reach out to all of you. I would ask all of you to let family and friends and associates know that for the next one, when we keep you informed, to get them into the loop. Remember, we can have hundreds of people on at any given day that we choose to have another electronic virtual forum. And I would enjoy engaging all of you, taking your questions, trying to answer the existing problems, of which there are so many now, ever since Bill de Blasio, the dope from Park Slope, was elected mayor 7 years ago. I just can't wait till he goes. Most people, they have no knowledge that he's term limited out. In fact, the one thing that I've seen in going around the city, actually trying to get signatures on the Republican petitions so I can qualify for the Republican primary, of which I have 10,000 signatures, win the Republican primary, and then run in the general election amongst the survivor of the many Democratic candidates, is I want to be able to say to all of the voters out there, the one thing we can agree on, Democrat, Independent, Republican, is that Bill de Blasio has personally destroyed the city of New York, the city that we love. He is the worst mayor in our lifetime. And I just want to cast a certain observation. I'm running in a Republican primary against a Sarah Tershwell, a nice woman. I've met her on a few occasions. A Fernando Mateo, who is a de Blasio Republican. Oh, yeah, he actually raised illegal campaign contributions for Bill de Blasio and has never apologized for that. He said, oh, I was a victim of that. I got took advantage of that. Hey, Fernando, if Bill de Blasio could snooker you, you have no business running for the mayoralty of the city of New York, because you have contributed to helping a man become the Miley Cyrus wrecking ball that has destroyed this city we love. I guarantee you, you cut my veins and arteries, ladies and gentlemen. You know I've bled in the streets and the subways of this city, been shot by organized crime, been attacked by gangs. There are elected officials who tried to put the guardian angels out of business in the first 13 years of our existence. It was a baptism in hell. I got locked up 76 times. 76 times, and oftentimes the police who misunderstood our motive were going on the words based on an Ed Koch who was calling us vigilantes, Hell's Angels, gang members. I got wooden shampoos, attitudinal readjustments, concrete facials. I got locked up in all these facilities, some of them closed, including Rikers Island. So I know what it's like to be on the inside and looking out, and the outside looking in. The police have acknowledged they made a mistake. Ed Koch eventually apologized. And let me tell you this, we have earned our credibility in 42 years of serving all the people of New York City. And it's going to be my job to save young people of this new generation from going to jail, from getting involved in drugs, getting involved with gangs, ultimately destroying their opportunity to live the American dream, which I've been afforded. So please join my campaign to save our city. Go to CurtisSliwaForMayor.com. That's CurtisSliwaForMayor.com. And we're going to do this again and again and again. From the suites to the streets, we'll bring it to your neighborhood. Send us an invitation. You'll get Curtis Sliwa live and in person. And there's no other candidate running for office who's going to be able to stand there and take a licking and come back ticking, as I have over the 67 years since I've been birthed at Brooklyn Hospital. Tomorrow is my 67th birthday. Let's get real. How many of you thought that I'd ever live to be able to have this virtual town hall meeting with you today? I've defied the odds, and I will defy the odds again. A Republican can be elected mayor of the city of New York. We had 20 years of Republican leadership in City Hall, and we had such a great quality of life, a renewal, a resurrection of the city. And in 7 years, the Democrat Bill de Blasio single-handedly destroyed it. I'm on a mission. I need your help. Go to CurtisSliwaForMayor.com and have a great evening.